Hello, fellow bloggers and YouTubers. Um, I'm just doing this video as a little follow-up to my blog. If you haven't heard in this video, I have created a blog website called American History, Past and Present, and it's on a recent topic on how COVID-19 and the Battle of Shiloh are very similar in their aspects of American expectation. And I'm talking about how American soldiers dealt with the surprise attack at Shiloh and how Americans today can react to that surprise with COVID. So that's what I've been doing. I just committed a blog, and this is kind of like a little follow up to kind of go more in depth for a little bit and explain the more deep nuances of the blog I'm talking about. So, in going further in depth, when I left off of my blog post, I left a quote by Ulysses Grant, who said, "Before the Battle of Shiloh, I thought the war was going to be over in one single battle, and then once after he won Shiloh, he realized that this was going to have to be a war of conquest if the United States was going to win the Civil War." And he would eventually do that at Vicksburg, at Chattanooga, and then obviously defeating Robert E. Lee in the Eastern Theater. But Shiloh was kind of like the realization where Americans realized that they were in as Shelby Foote said, a very bloody affair on their hands. And that, again, there's going to have to be a war of conquest if they're going to win. Now, how does that apply to today? Let's take that step back for a minute. How does that apply to us today, right now, in the current pandemic that we're experiencing? Well, honestly, it has everything to do with it. And, I mean, 4 months ago, nobody expected this to happen. And unfortunately, all we've seen is people just going along with it and just improvising as long as they can to somewhat combat the virus, whether that's through closing of restaurants, through closing of gyms, anything that relates to a normal life, even though I think normal is kind of a redundancy. There's no such thing as a normal life. And when you explain about the expectation attitude of Americans is that we like to know what's going to happen. And when it comes to this pandemic and when it came to the Battle of Shiloh, Americans expected this specific thing to happen. But obviously, at Shiloh, after 2 days of fighting, they would have about 24 to 31,000 casualties. And 31,000 casualties is actually a new estimate of a local historian in Tennessee who dug up soldiers' accounts, regimental histories, and records, and actually calculated that it may be as high as 31,000 casualties in 2 days. And it's really shocking. And Americans today also have that sense of just expectation that things are going to go their way, and obviously it hasn't. We're in the middle of I call the second wave right now, because there's only about more infection rates and death rates. And it's very surprising to see that this has become an issue where Americans, even right now, I mean, I remember walking in my hometown, there's a huge congregation of people at these baseball fields near my old middle school, and I was just shaking my head and like, I'm not going there. And that's the thing that Americans back then, in the 19th century and the 20th century today, we always have a tendency to think that this will not affect us, that we're the good guys, we're the exceptional nation, and that everything's going to be hunky-dory. Well, it's not. And this pandemic has kind of revealed that expectation just in a way that Americans haven't seen before, ever since the Civil War. And now what to do about that and how to apply that. When you look at Grant and his leadership, even during the Battle of Shiloh, even though the army wasn't caught by surprise, he still maintained that leadership quality of, okay, what's the situation? How are we going to deal with it? Here's the plans of what we're going to do. That can still apply to today. It can still apply to that. And there have been efforts by governors who have stepped up their leadership and said, we're shutting this place down because we want to make sure that nobody gets infected or sick. And leadership is a big part of that. And that's why Grant's leadership at Shiloh eventually helped him win the battle. So I think with good leadership and good influence of example is a very big way that is in Americans that Americans don't even realize. And we need to make sure that we have that sense of the prepare for the unexpected. And Grant and his actions at Shiloh, as I described in my blog, basically emphasize that, how struggle kind of produces leadership. And I don't know, maybe during the struggle that we're in right now with COVID, it's very complicated, and we need to figure out what kind of leadership we have in us so that we can project it onto others by example. And so that way nobody has to, how do you say it, like, take over. Nobody has to institute things through fear. Again, leadership is by example. It's not by just being a leader. And again, the same thing as with William Tecumseh Sherman. In my blog, I describe him and his actions near Shiloh Church. He understood the situation well too, and he basically agreed with Grant on the situation, saying that, with Grant saying to Sherman, hey, can you hold this area so I can create a new defensive line? He said, I can hold it, but it's going to be costly. So there needs to be also needs to be expectation of the cost of things that are going to happen. Like, for example, with the shutdown orders that just came, or the mandatory mask orders in Milwaukee that has been instituted today. There's going to be a cost, and it's not related to any political affiliation or anything. It's just a cost of saying, like, you're going to have to sacrifice yourself in order for the better good. And that's kind of what I see leaders across the country before the pandemic, and sometimes during it, showing that there had to be a cost to protect people's lives. And that didn't mean taking away civil liberties, because the stay-at-home orders aren't politically targeted. It's more for health reasons and not political reasons. Nobody's coming after them. And I talked with somebody how during this whole entire period there's just been a high uptick in paranoia, thinking that our freedom of speech is taken away, that our guns are being taken away. And that's somewhat Grant and all these governors are not symbolizing. They symbolize leadership in expecting the unexpected. And even getting caught off guard, learning during it, and also emphasizing perfect leadership during with coolness under fire like Grant was. Grant could just give an order like that and just be cool under fire, and nothing would affect him that much. I mean, during Shiloh, when he was set up defensive line, a man was coming towards him, and then a Confederate shell came in and blew the man's body apart, and it sprayed blood all over the place. Ron Chernow described it. It's a really crazy story. And then Grant said, and I say this in my blog, basically saying not being yet by a damn sight. And basically saying, though bloodied, kind of like we are bloodied by COVID-19, we're surviving to fight another day. And sooner or later, he would help the Union, he would lead the Union, the United States, and help win the Civil War. And if we can institute that today, we can help defeat COVID-19 by uniting with one another. That kind of emphasizes that leadership by example. And also expecting the unexpected, despite, sometimes we will get caught off guard, but in the same time, we need to make sure we institute firm leadership to help lead our country, or their soldiers at Shiloh for that matter, to fully create a team effort to fulfill the goal of driving back the Confederates or driving back COVID-19. And so that's kind of what I want to describe as the theme with you guys. And if you want to check it out, Grant's personal memoirs. He talks about Shiloh in here. It's amazing. And I also suggest reading Ron Chernow's Grant, because that is a very good book describing the man and his character and leadership. So I just want to leave you guys off with that. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Stay safe, stay healthy. God bless.